Tonight we're going back to the beginning of something big. Not just big money, but the invention of modern wealth as we know it. Before tech giants, hedge funds, and billion-dollar apps, there was one man who quietly became the world's very first modern billionaire. You've probably heard the name before, John D. Rockefeller. But tonight, we'll slow it down and really explore how one quiet, calculating man built an empire from almost nothing. But before we start the journey, go ahead and like this video. Subscribe if you're into slow, strange stories about money and power, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It's always nice seeing who's tuning in, whether you're wide awake in Tokyo or half dreaming in your bedroom in Glasgow. Okay, now get comfortable. Let your brain slow down, and let's drift into the story of the very first billionaire. How he lived, what he built, and what he quietly controlled from the shadows. Imagine it's 1872. You're standing in the middle of Titusville, Pennsylvania, a muddy makeshift town that didn't really exist 10 years ago. It smells like smoke, grease, and raw earth. The wooden sidewalks creak under your boots. Somewhere nearby, a pipe hisses. Steam rises from a crude engine. And over everything hangs the heavy, almost metallic scent of oil. You've just finished your third 12-hour shift this week. Your job? Tending to the derricks, tall wooden towers where men drill deep into the ground, hoping to strike black gold. There's no union, no helmets, no safety protocol. If a gas pocket ignites, the entire rig could explode. And sometimes it does. Your hands are blistered, your clothes stink, your pay, maybe a couple dollars a day, barely enough for food, rent, and a shot of whiskey to quiet your aching bones. Life in the oil fields is chaotic. Fires sweep through camps. Wells blow without warning. Workers are burned, crushed, or simply let go when the next town over strikes a richer vein. And yet, more people arrive each day. Immigrants, farmers, runaways, anyone who's heard the rumors of oil money. They flood into towns with names like Pithole, Boomtown, and Oil City. Towns that sprout overnight, balloon to 10,000 people, then vanish just as quickly when the wells run dry. In the early days, oil was scooped by hand and hauled by mule. Later came steam-powered drills and giant barrels. Pipelines crisscrossed the landscape. Refineries belched smoke into the air. Everything moved fast, except the people who got left behind. By the time John D. Rockefeller quietly started buying up refineries in Cleveland, the workers out here were already exhausted. They'd never meet him. But every drop of oil they scraped from the ground would eventually end up in his network. You work until dark, sleep in a cold bunkhouse, wake up to another day of fumes, grease, and risk. It's the cost of an industry being born, and the hidden foundation beneath the rise of America's first billionaire. Now that we've felt the rough, soot-covered start of the oil age, let's meet the man who would turn that chaos into a machine. Let's take a slow walk through the quiet halls of wealth, but not the gold and silk kind. Think polished floors, ticking clocks, orderly ledgers, a house where no one raises their voice. John Davison Rockefeller was born in 1839 in upstate New York. His father, a traveling salesman and occasional con man, who called himself Dr. William Livingston when the mood struck. His mother, a devout, hard-working Baptist who kept the house running. Young John liked routine, numbers, saving every penny. He wasn't flashy. He didn't care for attention. In fact, he once said he'd rather work behind the scenes forever, quietly improving things, without anyone knowing his name. But history had other plans. As a teenager, John worked as a bookkeeper, carefully tracking crates of grain and barrels of pork fat. He loved precision, hated waste, and slowly, methodically, began investing in small businesses. When the oil boom started, he didn't rush in. He studied the chaos, not the drillers, but the refineries, the bottlenecks, the inefficiencies. And in 1870, he co-founded Standard Oil. What followed wasn't loud conquest. It was silent domination. Rockefeller bought out competitors, made secret deals with railroads to undercut rivals, set prices just low enough to ruin others, then bought their assets at a discount. It was called horizontal integration. He just called it smart business. He kept working in the same quiet Cleveland office, surrounded by ledgers, never shouting, never speeding up, always watching. By the 1880s, Standard Oil controlled over 90% of America's oil refining. By 1900, Rockefeller was worth over $1 billion in today's money. He had become the richest man in modern history. And he didn't even enjoy spending it. He gave away much of his fortune through foundations, universities, and medical research. But his methods were controversial. Congress launched antitrust cases. Journalists labeled him a robber baron. Crowds booed him in public. He lived into his 90s, eating simple meals and taking long walks. He said he never wanted to be rich. He wanted to be efficient, controlled, predictable. In the end, Rockefeller wasn't the loud tycoon you might imagine. He was a quiet calculator, a man who turned order into empire and became the first billionaire, not through luck or inheritance, but through relentless discipline. So how does a man build an empire so powerful it has to be broken up by the government and still stay nearly invisible while doing it? Standard Oil didn't look like a kingdom. It looked like a filing cabinet. But beneath the surface, it was a masterpiece of control. Unlike the wild boomtowns, Standard Oil operated like a watch, quiet, intricate, and ruthlessly efficient. They built their own barrel factories, their own warehouses, their own shipping networks. If a single part of the process cost too much, they simply bought it. They didn't just sell oil. They controlled the journey from the ground to the lamp on your desk. One of their secrets was the railroad deal. Rockefeller negotiated with the railroads to ship his barrels at much lower rates than his competitors. And in return, he promised huge volumes. It wasn't illegal at the time, just deeply unfair. It crushed smaller businesses. Another key tactic, absorbing competitors. Standard Oil would approach a rival and offer to buy them out. If the answer was no, they'd lower prices in that area to the point of bankruptcy. And then offer again. Most accepted the second time. By 1900, the company had swallowed dozens of smaller firms. Not loudly, but through contracts, shares, and whispered meetings. Even the brand wasn't flashy. No billboards, no public speeches, just a reputation for quality and consistency, and the quiet knowledge that behind nearly every oil lamp, train engine, and industrial machine, there was Standard Oil. It was, in a sense, the world's first corporate octopus. Its arms stretched across everything, but its brain stayed in Cleveland, silent and methodical. Eventually, the public noticed. In 1911, after a long legal battle, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil was a monopoly and ordered it to be broken into 34 smaller companies. Ironically, that made Rockefeller even richer. He now held shares in dozens of thriving firms, including future giants like Exxon and Chevron. He had built something so large, so quietly, that even breaking it apart couldn't stop its growth. Now let's leave the refineries and follow the oil barons home. Imagine yourself stepping into a Gilded Age mansion. Marble staircases, imported tapestries, a dining room big enough for a basketball court. It's all here, but it's not necessarily relaxing. In the early 1900s, being rich didn't mean being free. It meant hosting, etiquette, formality, dozens of servants, a new dress or suit for every meal. If you were rich, you were also a kind of performer. The Rockefellers, for example, owned a grand estate in New York called COULDN. It had terraces, fountains, and sweeping views of the Hudson River. But John D. was still in bed by 9. He didn't drink, didn't throw lavish parties. He walked the grounds in silence, fed the birds, and wrote checks to charity. Meanwhile, others in the new American elite, like the Vanderbilts or Carnegies, lived louder. But they too followed rigid social codes, calling cards, corsets, elaborate seating charts. If you slipped up, you could be the talk of the dinner circuit. And not in a good way. Private rail cars and gold-plated bathtubs were real, but so were migraines, stomach ulcers, and insomnia. Many of these magnates were haunted by labor strikes, political scrutiny, or the ever-looming fear that the world they'd built might fall apart. And while they were surrounded by luxury, most had no privacy. Their lives were endlessly documented by the press. Even John D., who tried to live quietly, was followed by cartoonists, reporters, and angry mobs. In short, being rich in 1900 meant trading comfort for status. Gilded on the outside, but often exhausting underneath. By the time John D. Rockefeller died in 1937, he was no longer the feared titan of industry. He was 97, nearly blind, soft-spoken, a man whose name still held power, even though he hadn't run a company in decades. But his wealth didn't die with him. That's the thing people forget. Billionaire empires often outlive their creators. Companies, trusts, and foundations keep growing long after the founder is gone. Rockefeller's fortune was already massive when the U.S. government broke up Standard Oil in 1911. Ironically, that breakup made him richer. The spin-off companies like Exxon and Chevron rose in value, and he held shares in all of them. He stepped back from business and turned to legacy. The Rockefeller Foundation, started in 1913, funded global breakthroughs in medicine, education, and science, including work that helped eradicate diseases in multiple countries. His name became a brand, a whisper in elite circles. The family stayed rich, powerful, but quiet, not splashy. not loud, real estate, article university endowments, long dinners in quiet rooms. And while the world moved on to tech billionaires, Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg, the blueprint was already written. Rockefeller showed how patient control could build not just a fortune, but a dynasty. He didn't need a Twitter account. He didn't build rockets. But even now, his playbook lives on, in foundations, boardrooms, and quiet corridors of influence. When the man is gone, the money still moves. Now, the oil lamps are out, the ledgers are closed, the mansion is quiet. Sleep well.